Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right. Welcome to Politics Done Right from the studios of KPFT 90.1 FM, Houston, your community radio station. We have a great program for you today. Okay, today we have, of course, a newcomer, Vlad Dibrinsky. He is a Ukrainian American, and he's going to be here discussing what's happening in Ukraine. He's out there helping, trying to help families, etc. But he's also going to give us a history of Ukraine, something that while we're looking at the war, there's a whole big piece that is missing. Is Ukraine really a country? Is Ukraine, does Russia has any takes on Ukraine or any claims to Ukraine? They don't. Secondly, we're going to talk to Ted Weisgal. Ted Weisgal is a board member at KPFT. He's going to talk about where we are, how we intend to grow, etc. And last but not least, starting the program, we're going to have an inconvenient truth about the Mexican coyotes. What's the deal with these guys? Aren't they just capitalists? We are going to talk about that. But anyhow, we get busy. Let's get busy. Eric Hayes says cartels are making upwards of $1 million per week on the people smuggling per Texas DPS, not even drugs here. And how many millions are we making selling bombs? How many millions are we making doing a whole lot of things that we shouldn't be doing? I am not trying to justify the coyotes. I'm not. I'm just saying stop making it seem like these guys are doing something out of the ordinary. Those coyotes are just capitalists. That is what capitalists do. We, as capitalists, we do the same thing overseas, over here all the time. We have to, as a society, we have to grow up and understand that the problem is not humanity, but economic systems and political systems. And when you understand that, you can then love everybody because you understand that they're just a product of a socio-economic religious system. That's why I can listen to Eric Hayes. That's why I can listen to Bruce. That's why I can listen to Norman and everybody and feel the same good feeling no matter what you say. Right? Eric Hayes says the coyotes are terrorists, period. Point infinite. Really? Okay, then every capitalist is a terrorist then. You take a look, you equate what a coyote does. There are people who need to be smuggled into the United States to get a job, not to conquer. They don't look, let's be clear here. Coyotes are fulfilling a need. Let's stop. This may sound interesting to some, but there are people who want to come to the United States of America. The United States of America hire undocumented workers, okay? They do. The United States of America has corporations who, by design, they hire undocumented worker in the chicken industry and all of that. The government knows it, and most of the times they don't raid them. It's sort of a balance, period. But we know that America's economy depends on a lot of undocumented worker, whether you want to accept that or not. Now, that said, they have to get around the migra, these people that want to get over here. And some coyotes, some of them are ruthless, some are not. Some coyotes get the people over here in a more humane manner. Some of them just get them to the border and say, okay, go walk in the desert, and a lot of them die in the desert. That's horrendous. But capitalism does that. We go to Africa and we mine products that are developed, that are pulled out of the ground by kids that die or live short lives. We do that. Capitalism does that. But you see, what I talk about capitalism a lot of ways is it's abstracted, right? The person who owns that diamond shop that makes those sandpaper that has diamonds on it to be effective, they don't see all those dead African kids that are digging in the mines. They don't see that, right? So as far as they're concerned, they can wear their suits and they work for a company that makes diamond sandpaper and they make good monies from it, right? But you don't see what happened behind the scenes. So again, what I try to do with my program here is that we all are educated to reality. It's not about good or bad. When it comes to capitalism, anything goes. The coyotes are fulfilling a job. Manuel Antonio Noriega in Panama was fulfilling a need of the United States, drugs. Those coyotes are fulfilling a need. America needs undocumented workers so that we can pay them less, and that's what they provide. Okay? Folks, you guys know at KPFT we have a board of directors, and what I'm starting to do, and Ted is going to be our first, is to introduce you to the board of directors and tell you where we are trying to take this station. How are we trying to improve the station? How are we trying to make things better for the entire Houston metropolitan area and all the areas that we cover as a radio station, not only on air, but over the internet. So with us today, and without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Brother Ted Weisgal. Ted, how are you doing today?
Doing fine. Thank you. I hope you are well.
I am doing well, Ted. Anyhow, Ted, one of the reasons that I wanted to get you on is that you've been a longtime member of KPFT, a longtime activist in the community, Robert's Rule guy who wrote a book on Robert's Rule, et cetera, et cetera. I wanted to first ask you to introduce yourself to our audience and let them know what you're all about.
Well, for 32 years, I ran a lifelong learning program here in Houston called Leisure Learning Unlimited. I sold it, and 4 years later, it went out of business. A lot of people ask me whatever happened to leisure learning. Before that, I was a campus activities advisor at the University of Houston for 5 years. And before that, I got arrested at San Francisco State University. I was an outside agitator from San Jose State. I got arrested for unlawful assembly, failure to disperse, and disturbing the peace. It was part of a 5-month-long strike that was successful and led to the creation of the only College of Ethnic Studies in the United States. I participated in the celebration 2 years ago that marked the college's 50th anniversary. Black Studies, Mexican American Studies or Latino Studies, Asian Studies, Middle Eastern Studies, those are all parts of the college. And I think I know it led to my being hired to work at the University of Houston. I spoke with one of the key players in all of that. Her name is Deborah Danberg. She was a student body vice president, but she ultimately became a member of the Texas legislature. And she said to me last week, in reminding me as to why I got hired at U of H, and it was because I stood up for student rights.
There you go. I like the idea that you stand up for student rights, and seems like you're all around activist for some time now, which is a core of what we do at KPFT 90.1 FM Houston. Anyway, how did you? What turned you on to KPFT?
My sister. We both grew up in Los Angeles, and my sister, who wouldn't stand for the Pledge of Allegiance when she was in junior high and high school, and ultimately quit school because of the harassment she experienced. She knew that there was KPFT in Houston, and she asked me, "Why aren't you involved?" She had been a volunteer answering the phones during fund drives at the Los Angeles station, KPFK, and she told me I ought to be involved with KPFT. So when I saw an article in the Houston Peace News announcing a meeting at Rice University's Student Center and talking about a change in the bylaws and a new day for KPFT. I attended and participated in meetings for about a year, and those meetings led to the rewriting of the Pacifica bylaws. And I was elected to the board in 2001 and have subsequently stayed involved ever since, either on the board or when you have to take a year off because of term limits. I've been on committees. A couple of months ago, I did a workshop for all of the boards across the country on a format just like this one, not just like a Zoom format. I did a workshop on Robert's Rules of Order for all 5 Pacific stations.
Now, let me stop you right there. You've written a book on Robert's Rules, right?
Robert's Rules for Kids and Big Kids, a guide to teaching children of all ages the basics of parliamentary procedure. It begins in kindergarten.
Yeah, well, it's well from our meetings that these procedures can become difficult and cumbersome at times, especially if you're like me who are not completely fluent in them. Anyhow, let me ask you this: KPFT has just sold its building. What's your thoughts on that?
I think it was a necessary thing. We had mold problems, internal problems with the building at 419 Lovett. According to experts that we brought in, and I actually chaired a committee to go through this process, we brought in some mold experts, and they said it would cost about $100,000 to remediate the station, the address being 419 Lovett Boulevard. So the building was sold for $1 million, and I was informed at our most recent board meeting a week ago that our station is getting $800,000 of that $1 million, or thereabouts, and the rest will be going to the Pacifica Foundation.
Now, speaking about all of that, so in effect, that getting that. Not having to spend that $100,000 and getting some funds for a new building, we can have a pretty nice and solid rebirth right here in Houston in new locations, right?
And going back to the birth, there were a lot of people involved, Deborah Danberg being one, who was involved in getting the original station off the air in 1970, 3 years before I came to Houston. So what we need is people to get involved as committee members, and they can go to the website to find out more about it, kpft.org. But yeah, we can rebirth this radio station the same way we did, but we need a lot of help.
Now, it's interesting because let's make it clear. In as much as we don't have a building right now, KPFT, my show, Politics Done Right, and many other shows, we all are on a server that we give all fresh material, and it's still played live on air. So in as much as we don't have a studio right now, everybody's place and everybody with the show right now, they're giving you good material through their own studios. Now, when that new building comes to fruition, which is we expect to be sometime this year, it will be a new blast for everybody to see. So, folks, what Ted is going to make clear as well is there is a good reason to get involved, right, Ted?
KPFT is the station that is not beholden to large corporate sponsors. And as a result, for instance, the war between the Russians and the Ukrainians, you never hear the kind of money that is being made by the weapons manufacturers on all sides of that issue. On KPFT, we are not beholden to weapons manufacturers or anybody else, so we can tell the unvarnished truth.
That is so, I think that is one of the most important statements made thus far, Ted, because what folks can understand now is at KPFT, we don't owe advertising to anybody. So the only people that really that we are really enthralled to are the supporters of the station. So let me ask you before I get into how folks can support the station, et cetera. Where do you think right now, KPFT used to be only radio. There's a lot that we'd like to move forward to support other platforms. Are you seeing that those are the plans that we have, not only to move into radio, but online ventures, and maybe, who knows, certain other things that having a new venue will support?
Well, you might want to correct me if I'm wrong about this, but my thinking is it's people talking into a microphone or music being played by whatever kind of a player it is. The bottom line is the platform that it goes out into the universe on, whatever that is, it really doesn't matter. The bottom line is you have human beings talking to one another, you have music being played. So the technological side is a bit beyond my area of expertise.
Brother Ted, I am so glad you answered the question that way. And let me tell you why. You mentioned the most important factor. It's about having the people. It's about having humans involved in the station and being a part of whatever we do. We will determine, or not, we all will determine what the best platform at that time to distribute it. Is this best on an FM station? Is this best streaming? Is this best video? Is this best audio? So you are so right. The most important thing is having human beings become a part of the station and continue to support what we do, correct?
Correct. And, I never really thought, and I don't think anybody else did, about the idea that, we need a transmitter. And one of the reasons why that $1 million that we got for selling 419 Love It was to pay off the Empire State Building where the transmitter in New York City now resides. The bottom line is that transmitter used to be on the towers of the World Trade Center. And we never thought that, that building is going to collapse and we're going to have to find a new home and it's going to have to be quick and it's going to cost us a lot of money. Maybe we shouldn't be on an FM dial. I don't agree with that, but you have to factor in that transmitters cost you on a monthly basis a lot of money. Not as much here in Houston, where I think we have a transmitter out in far northwest Houston. Mm-hmm. But in New York, it's on the top of the Empire State Building. It costs us money every month. And we want to keep all 5 Pacifica radio stations on the air, or at least that's the decision that the people on the national board, including the host of this program today, Egberto, is on. So that's not my call. That's somebody else's.
Well, you know what? It's let me just qualify that it's everybody's call. We are a family at KPFT. We are a family at Pacifica, and we go through all we go through everything families go through, including growth. So we are growing our stations, and we want to ensure that all folks are participants in the station, whatever city you're in, whatever state you're in, because like Ted said, the human beings, what matters, and the form of the technology used to get it to your ears, to get truth to your ears, it's all over, something that we'll do. So Ted, in closing, give us a little closing statement. Let us know what you'd like to see our community do to enhance this station and to ensure that we can continue telling truth to power.
Well, off the top of my head, I can think of 3 things that people should do. Number 1, obviously right now they're doing it, and that is to listen to KPFT, either 90.1 or our HD channel. And with that, there's a 10-second, I think, delay. So when you flip to that station, there's going to be silence. So the average person who might just be running up and down the dial may not realize that there are two options right now when you listen to KPFT. The second thing is to contribute. You can contribute your time, and membership in this organization is available for people who just volunteer their time. That's what the bylaws say. Or you can contribute money. The minimum is $25 a year to become a voting member and thus eligible to run for the local station board. And that is what people will be doing later this year as my term ends. So you can be on a committee, and then you can eventually, if you have that desire, you can become a programmer. But those are the three ways. There's a fourth, and that is to promote the radio station. I've stood on some bridges over downtown Houston with a banner promoting Democracy Now!, which airs every weekday at 7 a.m. for an hour. And you can eventually, I hope soon, we will get bumper stickers again, and you'll be able to promote the station just by driving your car or parking it in a prominent location and not wasting fossil fuels. But you can volunteer in a variety of ways, and we need help. It's not just the 24 members of the local station board or the 22 members of the national board. We need people involved.
Ted Weisgal, a board of director on the local station board of KPFT 90.1 FM. Thank you so kindly for all that you do for the station. Thank you so kindly for how you promote the station. And thank you just for being Ted. You have a wonderful day. And thank you for having been on Politics Done Right.
Thank you very much.
As we all know, what's going on right now across the world that everybody's talking about is the Ukraine crisis. The war in Ukraine, a war that very few of us really understand what's going on. Well, luckily today we have somebody from the region now living in the United States, but can help us understand what's going on. Vlad Dibrinsky, thank you so kindly for being here on Politics Done Right.
I'm glad to be here.
Before we get started, Vlad, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? Give us a little bit of context here.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Ukraine. Until 7 years old, I was there. Then from 7 till 10, I lived in Siberia, in Yakutia, which is Far East Russia. Then I came back to Ukraine, and then I went to college there. And then I moved to Boston in the early 90s, and I attended Berklee College of Music. I became a musician. Then I moved to New York City, and since then I lived in the States. So basically, I'm a 30-year-old citizen of America. But, I've been also back to Ukraine since 2014. And I opened a music school there called American Music Academy, affiliated with the Berklee College of Music. We did the school there and in Kyiv. And I was going back and forth. And then from 2016, I was permanently based there because I married a Ukrainian girl and have a little kid. And we opened another school in two locations. And just now, last December, we came to the States sort of for Christmas, and we were going back on February 26th to Kyiv to open a new semester. And the 24th of February, as you know, the Russian rockets started to bombard the whole Ukraine, so we didn't go. So now we're based in Houston.
Now, are you living pretty much in Ukraine? Is that what you're saying? Is that you had moved back to Ukraine and now you've just had to reestablish yourself in the United States?
Yeah, since 2016, I was permanently based in Ukraine.
Yeah, well, tell us a little bit about Ukrainian history. In America, we are generally geographically challenged and politically challenge as well. So give us a little bit of history, starting a little bit before you got into the Soviet Union, and after the Soviet Union dissolved into back where Ukraine regained its independence.
Right. Ukraine is an ancient sovereign state. The statehood itself was established in the 9th century. It was called Kyiv Rus. The language is Ukrainian, and the kings were Ukrainian, but the heritage of the kings were the Swedish Vikings. So, and the country was established from Kiev all the way to Crimea, but Crimea was not called Crimea at that time. It was called a different name, Tavria. And so since then, Ukraine was a big state. So then in the 11th century, Ukraine had become the largest European state on the continent. And the Europeans know, I know the Americans don't know, but the Europeans know that every king of every country had connection to Ukraine. The reason why, because so there was a king Yaroslav, and he had 11 daughters, and all the daughters were married the princes and kings in Europe. And because of that, a lot of Ukrainian heritage, like for example, Queen Elizabeth, so she's related to Ukraine. The main Queen Anna of France is Ukrainian. She's daughter of a prince, and so on and so forth. Belgium, you name it. And then basically that was happening until the 12th century. In 12th century, as you know, the Golden Horde, the Mongol Tartars, they went from Mongolia at that time. Mongolia went to invade the steppes of Ukraine. So that's eastern part of Ukraine. And they went there, and basically Kiev was burned down to the ground. Okay. And Kiev Rus sort of moved to the west. And Lviv was established at that time. And then the city called Ostrog, which is like a spiritual center of Ukraine. And since then, it just sort of like became the second part of existence of independent state. Now, the eastern part was basically destroyed by Mongol Tartars, and that's how Crimea got established, right? And then, I should say this. So there were at that time two parts of Ukraine. So one part of more European, and another part was under the rule of Mongol Tartars. However, the Mongol Tartars were defeated. That's why the Europeans don't speak the Tartar language, right? By Cossacks. Cossacks were Ukrainian fighters that sort of kind of fierce Ukrainian fighters. And in 16th century, they defeated the Tartars basically to the ground. And since then, Ukraine was independent again. I mean, it always was independent, but it wasn't conquered. But then what happened, the Rzeczpospolita, which is the Polish-Lithuanian kingdom, started a war with Ukraine at that time. And by doing so, the Ukrainian forces fought, and they didn't have much winning gains there. And what happened is that the Russian prince at that time, from a new town called Moscow, and the country was called Moscovia, and the citizens were called Moscovites. They asked for help, and they gave help. And since then, so to speak, Ukraine, the eastern part of Ukraine, and Russia were friends, right? And I should say this: that parallel to Ukrainian history, Russia was established in 14th, 15th century by Ivan the Terrible. You probably heard of him. And he was established in Moscow. And then in 17th century, Peter the Great wanted to create an empire out of Russia as an example of Roman Empire. You know, he was educated, and he was self-proclaimed emperor. And the idea of Russia, he established their idea of foreign policy of Russia, basically. What that meant is ever expansionism to the east, most of all, because they wanted to go to the west, but they didn't have many wars, but they didn't know anything, but to the east. But since the heritage of Russia is Mongol Tartars, they didn't have any problems going to the east because it was the same people. And they went all the way to Yakutia, all the way to Alaska. Now, the Tsarist Russia existed until 1917, as we know it. Now, Ukraine, the western part of Ukraine, was conquered by Polish kingdom in 14th century. The eastern part of Ukraine became part of Russian Empire. And the Russian Empire also had Crimean wars with Turkey, right? And they lost twice, Crimea to English. However, English kind of returned it back to Russia for some reason. That's a good question to English people. So, and then after that, Ukraine was independent in 1918 when the revolution started in Russia. In 1918, the Russian government got established, and 1 year it existed as independent Ukraine, full Ukraine, from the east to the west, for 1 year. And then at the end of 2018, the Bolsheviks came, and they were having a larger army, and they defeated the Ukrainians again, right? And then in 1924, after the Civil War, Lenin basically annexed Ukraine as part of Soviet Union. So then Ukraine was sort of like part of Soviet Union all of a sudden. And then in 1991, and by the way, the Western Ukraine is a little bit different history because Western Ukraine was still part of Poland. In 1939, when Hitler invaded Poland, along with Stalin, they divided part of Poland, and that was part of Ukraine as well. So since 1939, Western Ukraine was part of Soviet Union. So that's why Western Ukraine has a little bit more history of independence than the East. Now, and then in 1991, when Soviet Union collapsed, all the republics that Soviet Union had, and there were 15 of them, automatically gained independence, and Ukraine as well. So since 1991, Ukraine finally got its independence, as it was centuries ago. So for 30 years, was independent.
Yeah, let me ask you a question here. Now, when after Ukraine left, after the Soviet Union dissolved, I imagine that even during the times of the Soviet Union, there was a fairly local federal government or not federal, but local state-like government within Ukraine. Is that correct?
Yes. Basically, Lenin's idea of Soviet Union was based on the federation per se. He saw how America was established, and he wanted to kind of repeat that. And he wanted to have different cultures inside of this big country, and from all the way from Baltic Sea all the way to Alaska, from the North Pole all the way to the Black Sea, right? So you imagine how big it is. And all the ethnic groups were kind of established in their countries, even though like Ukraine, it's not just Ukrainians who live there. There's a lot of Jews there. There's, Gypsies. I mean, there's a lot of people there. It's just he established this kind of idea that these people can basically have republics in a sense, but it's a quasi-republic. Basically, the government of that was elected by Communist Party, that was elected not elected, but appointed from the Moscow office. And it was kind of quasi-independent, but yet at the same time, it was a huge vertical, a very strong vertical from Moscow.
Excellent. Now, what is the issue as far as why did Russia now believe that it should place a whole bunch of guys military on your border and invade you with an ultimatum? What is the real pretext of what Putin is doing in Ukraine?
Oh, Putin is a Bolshevik, KGB guy. So basically, it's the same as Lenin and Stalin and everybody else. He said it vocally that he wanted to correct mistakes of Lenin and Stalin. For example, Lenin didn't allow religion, so Putin uses religion as their weapon, right? Then, for example, Stalin didn't understand the ethnic groups. He said, I'll understand the ethnic groups. I'll make sure I'll divide it correctly. So that's what he is. And also vocally, he said that the biggest tragedy of his life is collapse of Soviet Union. So he wanted to reestablish that. However, if you go back to Lenin and Stalin, the idea of Bolsheviks were the world revolution. And the world revolution meant that everybody should be communist, basically, in the world. That's why they reached out all the way to Central America, Cuba, and so on and so forth, China. And people might not know that China was not communist all the time. So, that's the idea of Putin. He's the same Bolshevik guy. He's bringing all the traditions of Bolsheviks back to it. So number one for him agenda is to make sure that Ukrainians as a nation doesn't exist, right? Which is a genocide. He said that. Number two, that's a program minimum, what they say, right? And then the maximum is going east to the territories ex-Soviet Union had. For example, he will say, well, we had Berlin to Soviet Union. Well, there you go. We had obviously Poland and all the Baltic states. We obviously had Romania and everything else also. So that's the program minimum, and then expansion after that. So basically what he's trying to do is going back to where it was in 91, before the collapse, and then going into the New World Order, as he said it, which is the Russian civilization order. And he calls it the Russian world. And the Russian civilization order means, first of all, it's ruled by ruble, not by dollar, as economical strategy. And number two, it has the idea of mentality as Russian. Basically, only Russian brings the peace. And the West is evil and all this. It all comes from Bolshevik ideology, right? But the idea is that the problem with Ukraine for him, without Ukraine, he cannot expand anywhere. He's just not. He can't. So he needs to have Black Sea. He needs to have right there inside of Europe. He wants to make sure that he can get his rockets right there where it needs. So Ukraine is very essential for him. And for years and years, he created propaganda to make sure that Russians, and not just in Russian, and also in the West, people are confused and who Ukrainians are. And he was basically, Moscow was the PR agency for Ukraine, right? You never heard from Ukrainian news. You heard it from Russia, right? They tell it what Ukrainians are. So, and that's how they created this monopoly on the news and the structure. And they sit in the UN, the Security Council, they sit in the World Bank. They basically sit in every major point. They stole everything the Soviet Union achieved and adopted to Russia, including the Ukrainian nuclear weapons. So by doing so, they feel very prominent where they are, and they can call the shots, basically.
It's sad. I mean, I imagine that you're not too happy that the Ukrainians gave up their nuclear weapons under the auspices of, I guess, the United States and Great Britain, who thought that was best to do in that time. Turns out that the Ukrainians are turning out to be much better in fighting and supporting what they believe in. It makes you wonder, why would Russia, whose army performs so badly, who is pretty much nothing more than a gas station, believe that they have they could possibly hold any intentions for world domination? Your thoughts on that?
That's a very good question. I'm still baffling myself. If I look at I have a military degree as well, and I kind of was trained as a military officer, and I'm baffling also how they fight and what they do. They don't fight like an army. They fight like a Mongol horde. Honestly, they just destroy everything in their side. They don't care. They don't have strategy in a sense. I think they counted on the fact that Ukrainians will be weak, that Ukrainians will not fight back. I think the Putin's KGB agents told him the wrong story about Ukraine, and I truly believe that because of corruption. He was paying the money to those operatives. They taking the money and buying yachts and did nothing, and then they gave him this information. Oh, Ukrainians are all happy about Russia. And they're not, right? So, and now more than ever, they're united, not just in Ukraine, all over the world, So I think he miscalculated. I think Putin, being a KGB guy and being, the KGBs, they all care about the power and cash. That's all they care about. And he was obsessed with cash and power. And he thought he can bribe anyone and they'll be loyal to him because power is important. But apparently, not just him was obsessed with cash, and nobody cared about power. So they just took the cash and that's it. So I think he miscalculated. But then also, I think a lot of money that Russia gained from selling the energy, which is about, in my calculations, about $115 trillion since 2001. Which is a huge amount of money. And that's how Russia became rich, in a sense, right? It's not that rich country. The economy of Russia is equal to Italy. So it's not that, it's not that major. I can't hear you. Sorry, something happened.
It is smaller than the state of California itself. It is right. Sad, but it's not even as large as the state of California. Now, I think now that are the Americans doing enough, or is NATO doing enough to help Ukraine right now?
No, NATO does nothing. Zero, absolutely zero. In fact, I think NATO is just an organization for paperwork. That's all it is, and maybe taxing, and that's it. If you look at countries who are NATO countries right now, they independently help in Ukraine. They are all independently helping, and NATO just doesn't do anything. So NATO, for me, even though they were established to defend NATO countries from aggression from Soviet Union, as you remember, right? So Soviet Union now equals Russia, basically. And I'm not seeing any practical involvement from NATO, zero. They're not even helping.
Are you satisfied with what the United States is doing?
Well, I should say this. I remember how Biden said that back in January that if Putin is doing a minor incursion in Ukraine, that's going to be fine. That phrase was kind of a giveaway that he was not preparing for war, and he was okay for Putin taking chunks of Ukraine, whatever he wanted. So that's my impression of that. Now, since nobody expected, including Biden, that Ukrainians are going to fight, that Zelensky is not going to flee, that we're going to step in and make sure that our land is nobody taking away, he was surprised. That's what I think. And I think he was in an uncomfortable position to sort of shift his old plans for 2022 in foreign policy. And now he's forced to act upon what's going on, And obviously, as the leader of the free of civilized world, he has to put an example. And he has to. Obviously, a little bit too late, but better later than never. So a lot of lives are lost, a lot of children have died, women raped, all of that stuff, and right now it's still not over yet. And who knows how Russia is going to behave, because they can just put a nuclear bomb in Ukraine. Who knows? Nobody can predict.
Do you still have relatives? I imagine you do have a lot of relatives that are still in Ukraine. Are they in Kyiv, Mariupol, Lviv? Where are they?
Well, my wife's family are in Severodonetsk. Severodonetsk, that's Luhansk region. That's where heavy fighting is. Her mom escaped. Her sister, we got her out right in the very few first days, and we put her to Poland. But her grandmother, she's older, and she is a disabled person, and we tried to get to save her from there, but she said she can't leave because that's her whole life there, and she doesn't want to leave her home, even though there is no home anymore. Her apartment,
no social services either for her, right?
Well, it's not like social services. So there are volunteers in Ukraine all over, and the volunteers going in and helping people who are stuck there. And but it's hard, as you can imagine, because of the shelling and bombing and all that stuff. But she lives with 30 people in the basement of a building. There are some children, and we send her medicine as well. And then the volunteers do the food, and she's refusing to go. And it's not easy to go from Severodonetsk because of the shelling. To leave Severodonetsk. So she's there. Then I have an uncle who was in Ivano-Frankivsk, and he has a big family. He's a big daddy. He has 7 children, and they all girls and 1 boy. And when the first rocket landed in Ivano-Frankivsk, the ballistic rocket, his wife couldn't speak for 3 days. She was so shell-shocked, and they basically took the car and went all the way to Poland. From Poland, they couldn't find rent, so they went to Croatia. So now they're in Croatia. But, there's tons of refugees. As far as my family, that's all I have. But I have friends, I have school friends. I have friends I grew up with.
And your business is bombed, I understand, as well, or?
Yes. Well, we just got a new rent building with investors because my school was growing and growing. The demand is there, everybody wants to learn jazz and blues, so that's kind of a cool thing. And then, and we opened a new building. We were about to start the new semester. I was about to fly on the 26th with my wife and the child, but it was bombed. So the first rockets that happened the very first day, there was every ballistic rocket hit the airports, and then some civilians areas. So my school was near that area where the rocket is, so it was bombed.
The shrapnel got to it.
Yeah, so we'll see. I still hope to go back there one day, but not now, obviously.
I am pretty sure you will. Let me just say that I think it is interesting that what is happening now, where we're heading. So my next question is: do you think that absent Putin going either nuclear or with, let's say, chemical weapons, that you can actually win this thing in the near term?
Well, first of all, he already used chemical weapons 3 times.
Okay. I heard reports, but I don't know if it was ever confirmed.
Yes. And he uses all the time the phosphor bombs. Phosphor bombs, also chemical weapons, right? So he's used that. As far as the nuclear, the hinting, recently I just looked at the news and Russian news. I looked at the Russian news because I want to know what they think. And the Ministry of, how do you call it? The Ministry of Extraordinary Events, that's their ministry. They put an information for the public and saying, we expect that NATO will retaliate a nuclear bomb. That's what they said, a nuclear bomb, on the 24th of April. So you should be prepared. Then they took this off. So they're playing with that idea. So I think they're playing with that idea very much because Putin is a KGB guy. As a KGB guy, he wants to make sure that the Russian public is happy about the new victory over fascism and Nazi, as they say, right? And that's on 9th of May. So he needs to kind of repeat himself as a big, winner of that. And he needs to win something. So far, he didn't win anything.
Well, unfortunately, given the prevailing wind to be dependent on where he uses a bomb in Ukraine, the blowover is going to go right over his own people in Russia. So that would be an interesting thing for him to do.
He already did this. For example, in Severodonetsk, he blew up a chemical factory, a huge one, chemical factory. You probably saw the pictures, huge kind of red clouds into the sky. All the wind went straight to Russia.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. The prevailing winds is to Russia, and he hurts his own people. Not a very smart man, just a whatever. Anyhow, I understand that you are trying to raise monies and you're having events to support the people in Ukraine. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, about several days after the invasion, my wife and we thought, how are we going to fight? First reaction was, hey, you know what? I'll go fight. I'm a man. I'll go fight. But then we have a little kid, and then we talked about it, and I can't do it. And we decided to help however we want. And then by chance we got an email from a girl who asked me for help. And I'm like, well, so what do you want? And she's like, well, I have no money for diapers for my kid. And that started kind of an idea, the whole thing. I'm like, well, let's focus on that. And then at first, Lviv was a huge amount of refugees, and they didn't know where to go. So we started talking to them, and then we realized it's a big problem because, first of all, nobody was prepared for this, as I said. Number two, the Red Cross didn't help inside of Ukraine; they just helped outside. And even though Red Cross, you have to file an application, and then maybe in 2 weeks they'll give you some food and maybe temporary housing. Temporary housing means kind of a gym and school somewhere. So it's not really housing; it's just a shelter. And then when we talk to these women, they're very shy, and imagine you live in your life, you go to work, you have your car, apartment, house, whatever it is, and then all of a sudden you have nothing, and then you're running for life, and you have no idea what's next.
Shameful.
Right. So we decided, let's make a fund. And then a friend of mine who lives in Louisiana, he said, well, there's a site called GoFundMe. And I went to them and I sent them a message. We talked. I said, well, that's what I want to do. Because they're vetting a lot of scammers. Apparently, GoFundMe was scammed a year or 2 years ago. I don't know. And so they were trying to interview me. So we talked. And then they said, okay. And the idea of the fund is very unique because we're sending cash. That's all we do. We're not sending clothes or food or anything like that. First of all, NGOs, that's all they do. Every NGO, they send clothes, food, and give shelter. That's all they do. But they don't do the needs would need it. For example, a woman say, like she's in Poland, like yesterday. This is a fresh one. She's in Poland. She went there on the March 10th. So that's already like a month, right? And she's living in the hostel with the same women with kids in one room, 6 women, and I don't know how many kids because she had 2. So in one room in hostel, and that's all they have. They don't have the documents yet because it's a huge line in Poland to get any documents. And then she applied for Red Cross. She didn't hear back from them yet.
They need money. You're absolutely right. What they need is money.
So how are they going to survive? So and we basically whatever we get the money, we send it, and they buy baby stuff. Basically, like I have a baby, I know how hard it is, So and it's every day. So so that's what we do. The same thing in Ukraine, for example. Some women never left, right, and they staying where they staying, and they So there was one woman also. She had about 7 children, adopted 2 and 5 her own, with her husband. But her husband is a disabled person. She lost her job, obviously, and then she's in the suburb of Kyiv near Bucha, but not in Bucha, near Bucha. And there was nowhere she can get away because it was all surrounded by Russian soldiers. So we thought, how are we going to help? And there was a pharmacy there in that village, and then plus a grocery store. And so what we did, we found out the ability to send through MoneyGram directly to her card, because apparently her bank accepted the MoneyGram straight to her card. And that way it was the only way to make sure that she eats with kids, And there's tons of these things, tons of it. We helped, I have like 30-something families, and not just with cash. We also help with volunteers. For example, some woman, like she wrote to me from Kherson, and Kherson is occupied, as you know. And she said that she has no money, all of that stuff, and obviously the volunteers cannot give her because it's occupied. So I called my volunteers friends, and the Protestants. So they kind of snuck in to her son and gave her the packets of food. So that was kind of interesting kind of operation we did. So there's a lot of that. The most.
Is there a way to provide you guys some help? What you're doing? I imagine one of the producers told me that you were doing a fundraiser or something like that for Kiev.
I'm going to Los Angeles tomorrow, and we're going to do with a bunch of other artists, including daughter of Tony Bennett, Antonia Bennett, and then Mira Homik. She is a famous violinist, and I'm a blues guitarist, jazz and blues guitarist. So we're going to do a fundraising kind of concert, a private concert, to raise the money and to the fund and send it over. I have about 15 approved families for help right now. Why I'm saying approved? Because we interview each of the families. Because some, I can help.
There's always fraud. So I mean, yeah, you make sure.
Right.
Well, let me tell you, we're close on time now. Vlad, why don't you give us a closing message that you'd like to leave with our audience?
Well, you have to realize, guys, that it shouldn't be any confusion anymore. There's a sovereign country with independent people got attacked by an aggression of Russia. Nobody attacked Russia. No one attacked Russia. Nobody attacked Russian people in Ukraine. Imagine Kyiv is a Russian-speaking, Kharkiv is a Russian-speaking, Kherson is a Russian-speaking, Bucha is Russian-speaking. So everything, everything you hear as a confusion is made by KGB propaganda in order to win your minds to not give help and that Russia will do its genocide. So you have to realize that there is no neutrality anymore. You're either with a civilized world or you're not civilized. It's just what it is. And you have to be part of the civilized, no matter what.
Vlad Dibrinsky, thank you so kindly for having been on Politics Done Right, and I wish you well.
Thank you.
You can listen and or watch Politics Done Right Mondays through Fridays on Facebook Live at facebook.com/politicsdoneright or on YouTube Live at politicsdoneright.com/YouTube. Please do not forget to follow me on Twitter for updates. My Twitter handle is @Egberto Willies, @EGBERTOWILLIES. But don't you forget, listen to us live on air at KPFT 90.1 FM on Thursdays at noon and at Fridays at 11 a.m. all Central Time. Please get one of my several books out there. As I see it, Class Warfare, the only resort to right-wing doom, for a contribution of $120. It's worth it. How to talk to your right-wing relatives, friends, and neighbors for a contribution of $120. How to make America utopia, take away the economy from those who rigged it, for a pledge of $120. Get any two of those books for $200, any three of those books for $250. The contributions for my books go directly to support our station, KPFT 90.1 FM. Alternatively, folks, please get your basic KPFT only membership for $40, a Pacifica only membership for $25, or choose from one of our many other gifts for your contribution. Just go to kpft.org, choose Politics Done Right for the program, and select an option either for our books or something else to support the station. It is definitely worth it. Please remember to keep your community radio station in your minds. Keep KPFT on your mind. Talk about it. Tell your friends about it. Tell them you know about this station in town, 90.1 FM Houston, that needs your support. That is there to provide that nourishment that we need. KPFT 90.1 FM Houston. Well, folks, that's it for today. You know how I'm going to end this baby. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right. And you know how I end this baby. I am what? Out.
Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.